Welcome to 2025. I hope that, unlike the thumbnail, you got exactly what you wanted. And if you didn't, reach out to your godmother and I will try to manifest it for you. Now, January is the month that has the wolf moon. And last year I did my top 10 werewolf films. And so many of you watched and commented, and I loved it. And you made fun of the way I say wolf, and I've been working on it, but there's been very little improvement. So kind of like to piggyback on that, I didn't want to redo it and be redundant. I am doing creature features. And as always, this is my list, my top 10. I would love to hear yours in the comments below. Now, in terms of creature features, I tried to steer clear of realistic monsters like backcountry or Cujo or open water or even Jaws. That said, you will argue with me and say, but there are real monsters in your list. Yes, yes, I know. I know. We can argue about it. We can argue in the comments below. That's fine. The exception in my list is the real monsters are not acting realistically in any way, shape, or form. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, the tradition of creature features is that they're meant to be fun. Some of us oldies, like your godmother, can remember watching creature features on television or even at the drive-in, and they're silly. They're a silly time. And my number 10 falls in line with that. This is also my nostalgia pick, although it's not going back too terribly far. You'll see in this list, I didn't do any of the oldie ones, but number 10 is Tremors from 1990, which was directed by Ron Underwood, starring Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like everybody and their brother is in this film. And it is fun. It's silly. It's funny. The creatures here are giant prehistoric worms that love to eat people. And the title of the film, there's kind of a duality here. It comes from the fact that, you can feel these worms rumbling around before they surface, but also in order to lure the worms to the surface, the characters will like throw things and make vibrations on the ground. The monsters are cool. They have these like snake-like tongues, these big cavernous mouths. They look sort of like a leech and troglodyte hybrid. They look ancient. And what they did really well in this film is that they hid the creature a lot. The creature's more in shadow, more like in just a glance of it. And they were able to do that to compensate for any design flaws. Number 9 is Sweetheart from 2019, directed by J.D. Dillard and starring Kiersey Clemons. This is a story about a woman who washes ashore after a wreck. And basically, the movie is a lot of people washing ashore. There's bodies washing ashore. There's a lot of wash ashores. But initially, when she washes ashore with a friend of hers who dies shortly after they reach this island. And most of the film is her alone. That's why I said it's starring Kiersey Clemons, because it's really her film. She buries her friend out of respect, but in the night, something digs up his body and drags it into the ocean. So she's sitting on the beach. She's trying to survive. It's like a survivor story. And she's on the beach and she sees her luggage out in the water and she swims out to get it. And as she's swimming, she looks down and sees that there's this huge hole in the ocean's floor, like a cave or a den. So another body washes up and she decides to use this as bait so that she can see the monster. Eventually, she does encounter other survivors. There's 2 other survivors, and they gaslight the hell out of her when she's trying to tell them about this monster. And I really don't want to give anything else away because it is a really cool story. There's a really awesome final battle. And satisfyingly, we have a woman of color as the final girl, which we do want more and more diversity with our final girls. The creature design is good. It looks like an offspring of Godzilla and Skeletor. It looks best during the night scenes, seeing it in the light. As always, it's hard. It's really hard to make those monsters look good in full daylight. And, we all have troubles looking good in full daylight. And the monster moves really well in the water. Number 8 is The Boogeyman from 2023. And I do have a couple 2023s here. The Boogeyman was directed by Rob Savage and stars Sophie Thatcher and Chris Messina. When the trailer to this came out, I got so excited. So excited. This is a slumber party movie. It's dark. It has this nostalgic feel. It felt like classic horror to me. And when I say classic, I mean 1980s. I know. The setup here is there's a therapist with 2 daughters, Sadie and Sawyer, and Sadie's a teen and Sawyer's an elementary aged girl. And yeah, their mom died in a car accident, and we're going to talk about car accidents again later. And mom's often dead in these films, and she's almost always dead in fairy tales, and we can talk about that at another time. As I said, this film is dark. Even in a therapist's office, it's dark, like unusually so. What the boogeyman is in this film is there's a shadow monster. And we're told this monster comes for your kids when you're not paying attention. And here is the barometer of social pressure, folks. Parents neglecting children and using technology as a babysitter. And we even have a gamer scene to just send that idea home. The therapist is told this. He's told loud and clear about this neglect monster, but he ignores it because the cobbler's children go shoeless, right? And the therapist's children are not listened to. There's a really cool exposure therapy scene to cure Sawyer of her fear of the dark. And the creature here, we all know the boogeyman, right? We look for him under our beds. We look in our closets. When this boogeyman appears, he appears in the dark. It's always very dark, which again is a really good approach with these monsters. He has these roots coming from him, and they talk in the film about roots. Sawyer has a loose tooth that she can't get out, and Sadie says, well, mom always said our roots run deep. But it's an allusion to this idea of not letting go. And this family has been crippled by grief, and they are unable to let go. And it's understandable. Sometimes it's hard. You don't want to let go. You don't want to let go of that grief because you don't know what's on the other side, and you become comfortable with that grief. So having the boogeyman with those roots was a really cool choice. Because he's hidden in the dark a lot, I also felt like this might be a reference to the fact that we all have our own boogeyman. We all have our own trauma and grief, and he might look differently to each of us. But again, fun film in terms, I'm not fun because it's grief driven, but fun film in terms of its like slumber party appeal. It's one that I will probably watch multiple times. Number 7 is Crawl from 2019, directed by Alexandra Aja and starring K.S. Golidularo and Barry Pepper. I'm sorry, Kaya, I totally blew your name. Yes, I know. This is the one that you're like, but Godmother, you said no real monsters and these are Florida alligators. I know. But in this film, these alligators are super, super predatory. And the alligators I have met want nothing to do with me. Believe me, because I want to pet their bellies more than anything in this world, and they want nothing to do with me. I've also been through multiple hurricanes with alligators. They're not looking to hurt anybody during a hurricane. They're trying to survive just like the rest of us. Although, I know somebody who in the most recent hurricane, which was Milton, they were walking through like waist high water and they did feel something like go by them under the water. And, oh yeah. So it's creepy, but they're not looking to hurt us, especially not during a hurricane when they're just trying to survive themselves. But anyway, so this story is about a young woman, and it takes place literally where I live. That's one of the things that I really love about this film is I'm like, oh yeah, I know this. And there's a hurricane and everyone's been told to evacuate, but she can't reach her father. So she's trying to find him and the dog. There's a dog. And, it's just, this is a film that really hits different when you've been through multiple hurricanes as we have in the past couple of years here. I think the first time I watched it, we had not, 2019, no, we had not. We had not gone through Ian and then Debbie and Milton and whatever. I'm missing a couple. Now at this point on the other side, we've been through these, and it really does hit different when you hear those like sirens on the phone and the emergency messages saying no one can come help you. Like, you're like, yeah, I know, I've been through this, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So the monsters in this are alligators, and they look real. They did a really good job with these alligators. They look real. They move realistically. They move very swiftly and purposefully. And despite the fact that I have extreme PTSD from hurricanes, I still find this film to be a comfort film. Number 6 is Splinter from 2008, directed by Toby Wilkins and starring Shea Whigham and Paulo Costanzo. And in this film, we have a young couple heading off for a romantic camping trip. And the godmother really needs to rethink romantic camping trips, because that's always a setup for extreme carnage in horror films. But anyway, this couple, they're going off on this trip, and they are carjacked by another couple, possibly a methed out couple. It's like a really disturbing couple. And as they are driving, they run over this like splinter creature that causes them to have to pull into a gas station, which they realize is abandoned. The monster in this is formidable. It's not only splintery in appearance, but it earns that Splinter moniker because if pieces of it are dismembered, they can go off and attack on their own. We learn that the creature responds to body warmth. It seeks out its victims that way because it wants new hosts. And you know that saying, die by 1,000 splinters? Yeah. Well, that's what makes this monster so cool and creepy. This is an engaging film, and surprisingly, there's some really nice character development as well. Number 5 is The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster from 2023, directed by Bomani Story and starring Leia DeLeon Hayes and Denzel Whitaker. And I'm going to try, the godmother will try to keep this brief. It is a modern day retelling of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I have read Frankenstein more times than I can count. I've taught it more times than I can count. I presented on it at academic conferences. So I could really bore you to tears with this. And I'm really going to try to stick to the film and not go off on this whole, tribute to Mary Shelley. But there are nice homages to that novel in this film. Like, for example, the main character has a notebook that's labeled The Modern Prometheus. And we have the monster in a wall watching a family, just like in the novel. And then there's also some nice nods to the 1931 film, like zapping the monster with electricity to get him to reanimate. He befriends a little girl, just like in the movie. So what we have here is a main character named Vicaria, like Victor, and we're told her last name is of Germanic origin, Frankenstein, and she's a super science girl. Her family has been torn apart by death. So her scientific goal is to defeat death. She becomes the body snatcher in her neighborhood. People talk about this body snatcher because she takes corpses and tries to reanimate them. Her brother Chris passes, and so this just elevates her desire, and she is able to reanimate him. He becomes the monster in the story. There are many things to love about this film. First, we often forget that Mary Shelley was a very young girl when she wrote Frankenstein. She was a teen. We remember that she was in that castle with Lord Byron and Percy Shelley in the storm, and they had that contest. And in film depictions of that night, they often hire an actress who is in her mid to late 20s. And just because of the setting, it's easy to picture a little bit older of a person and forget how young she was. So I really appreciate that in this film, we do have a young woman as the main character. I like the social commentary of Vicaria being an outsider. She lives in the projects, so she's seen as an outsider within the scholarly scientific community. And Mary Shelley herself often felt like an outsider in society, and also within her own family. This monster, let me get back to the film and get off of Mary Shelley. This monster I really liked. When I watched the 1931 film and The Bride and those other films, Bride of Frankenstein, the monster to me is not scary. He's sometimes silly the way he looks and the way he moves. This monster was creepy and he moves quickly. He's often seen in the shadows, like his face is not terribly distinct, which I think is part of the social commentary of this. I mean, I feel like there's a social commentary going on with this monster of he's sort of this like interchangeable, non-distinct, very threatening creature. And it's supposed to show how society often views Black men, unfortunately, as all being like lumped together, these threatening people, you know. And again, it's very unfortunate, but I think that's what they're trying to say in this film. So I really like the creature design here, and I really like the focus. And again, this does go back to the novel, I'm sorry, that no one in the film is just a monster. They're gangsters in this film, but they're really complex. They're not flat characters, and they're not monsters in their hearts. They're monsters because they're reacting to their environment and to their circumstances and to the expectations for them. Just like in the novel, Victor Frankenstein creates this creature that doesn't start out as a monster. But what's interesting, the twist here in between that novel and the film, is that Victor Frankenstein creates a monster who he doesn't love because it's not what he thought. Like, he creates something foreign to him and he's repulsed by it. He can't feel any love for it. But in the film, Vicaria is horrified by her creation because she does recognize the monster and she can still see the brother that she loves inside of him. So we are again dealing with grief and trauma. I know I started this by saying creature features are fun, and then I picked all of these ones dealing with grief and trauma. You know, it is a tradition though too. You know, you think about like the Babadook and some of those. It is a big part of creature features as well. Number 4 is The Ritual, which is the 2017 film directed by David Bruckner and starring Ralph Spall and Archer Ali. Sorry. I really enjoy this film. I've watched it multiple times, and I'm always charmed by the dialogue between the characters because it feels very real to me. In this film, we have a group of 4 friends who are going on a hiking trip to commemorate a friend of theirs who passed 6 months earlier. The friend was killed during a robbery at a liquor store, and the one who died is named Rob, and he and friend Luke went inside the store to get liquor while the other 4 waited outside, or other 3 waited outside. So there's a holdup in a liquor store, and Rob is like tries to do something and he's killed. And during all this, Luke is hiding. So there's a lot of poignant moments in this film where Luke is questioning his actions. Why did he hide? Why didn't he try to save his friend? Had he done something, would Rob still be there? And he's not the only one questioning it. The other friends are as well. They're on this trek, as I said, and as they're, you know, hiking, they feel like they're being stalked by something. And there's a lot in this film that you're not seeing. There's a lot that's not being shown, but like you hear or it's just, and there's so much tension because of it. It is really scary. It works so well. And I'm all in with this movie until the monster reveal. I hate to say that because I know so many people love the monster reveal in this film, and I really didn't. It's a unique monster. It's such a creative build. I don't really have a problem with that. I think it's just that it wasn't what I was expecting or what I pictured. So there's just the littlest bit of disappointment there. That said, this film has some great folk horror, fantastic dialogue, and tons of tension. Number 3 is The Descent from 2005, directed by Neil Marshall and starring Shauna McDonald and Natalie Mendoza. Guess what, folks? More grief and trauma. This film is not for the claustrophobic, as it's about 6 women who go spelunking in an underground cave, and it is not an easy trip due to tight spaces, tunnels collapsing, and monsters. This film opens with a very famous scene. Anyone who's seen it remembers this scene. And you know what, again, I know I mentioned this earlier. I'm done with the car accidents. I'm done. I'm really done. I've had it. Please stop terrorizing the godmother with these car accident scenes. This one in particular is gruesome. I've been on this earth a long, long time, and I've witnessed deadly car accidents. I used to commute. I commuted for 25 years. I had a horrific commute, and I saw horrific things. I've been involved in accidents. Fortunately, no one's died in them, but like, I don't need you plucking at my PTSD. And it's an easy out. It's too easy. Find something else. I'm done. I'm done with it. But anyway, let's get back to the movie. They're spelunking. As always, people get injured on these trips, broken bones they have to deal with. And then there's monsters, and the monsters look good. And they really make sense from an evolutionary standpoint, and they're super creepy. But the real terror in this film is the cave and the claustrophobia and the injuries and the treachery among friends. I mean, groups of women, sometimes can have this little backbiting stuff going on. Now, this film famously has 2 endings. So I would love for you in the comments below to know which ending you would prefer. Number 2 is Barbarian from 2022. And you're like, Godmother, why is this number 2 above a classic like The Descent? 2 words, Bill Skarsgård. It was directed by Zach Kreger and stars Bill Skarsgård. Did I mention Bill Skarsgård's in this movie? And I'm not apologizing. I'm not apologizing for loving Bill Skarsgård. It also has Georgina Campbell and Justin Long, who's kind of become a scream king, right? So this movie starts with a really super cool premise in that 2 people have booked the same Airbnb for the same night, and they can't reach the owner, which is, weird enough. And then you throw my boy Bill in there, and you can't help but be like, is he up to some dangerous shenanigans? But he's super, super dreamy in this film. And I really was like, I don't care. I'll stay. I don't care. I don't care if he's a killer. But it then switches from like, is he a crazy killer, to there is something living in tunnels beneath the house. And then Justin Long comes in. And again, our expectations are kind of turned around. They did some really nice casting with this film. And I had read somewhere that before Justin Long, they wanted Zac Efron to be that. So either way, that would have been good as well. But with Justin Long, it was really good because it did tamper with our expectations for those of us who are horror fans. This film, again, is about trauma and really about different types of misogyny. It really shines a light on that and the vulnerability of women in our society. Now, the creature design. The creature is sort of silly looking, but once you get the backstory on the creature, it becomes sort of sad, like you feel sad. So it no longer is silly. I'm not saying it's entirely scary, but no longer silly. I love this movie. And I do love it for that social commentary, which is very contemporary, but I think will continue to resonate for some time. Number 1 is also my controversial pick, as many might not rank this as high and many might not have actually seen it. But this movie brings me great joy. It's Monstrum from 2018, and it's directed by Hu Jong-ho and starring Kim Young-min and Kim In-kwon. Monstrum's a period piece, and it's beautiful, and it's elaborate, and the costumes are beautiful, and the filming is beautiful. It's wonderful. There's a lot of political intrigue in this film because there's a plague that is, you know, the countryside's being faced with a plague. And there's also this monster that's rumored to be rampaging the countryside as well, the monster they call Monstrum. But in the very beginning of the film, at least, it's not clear. The plague is clear, but Monstrum, you're not sure whether he's real or whether they are staging monster attacks to dethrone the current ruler and put someone else in his place. This movie has everything you would ever want. There's a monster. There is, you know, a plague. There is humor involved. There is swashbuckling and sword fights and action. It's sort of like an action meets horror meets creature feature. It's really, really cool. There's a young girl who wants to fight. You know, we have a little bit of a final girl story going on. The creature design's really, really fun here. The monster moves like in this fast, frenetic way, and it looks like a cross between a totem and a gorilla and a dragon. Like all good monster movies, I applauded when Monstrum showed up. You know how like when you're watching Godzilla and you're like, oh, thank God he's here. Like that's how I felt, because I was getting really tired of some of these characters and I'm like, oh, please kill them, Monstrum, please. And I'm not going to give you the backstory on like the origin story for the monster because it's fun and I want you to discover that yourself. This is a South Korean film, so they say funny things like beasts from the West, you know, which is a nice flip on us when we're always like, oh, those creatures from the East, like Godzilla and Rodan and everything. So it's really nice. The monster has bad eyesight, so you kind of have to hold very, very still so he doesn't see you. And they wipe this like goo on themselves. It's so gross and disgusting. But they wipe this goo on themselves so that he doesn't smell them. It's crazy. It's fun. And this one really bookends nicely with my number 10, because again, it has that fun tradition that is crucial to creature features. So thank you for watching my top 10 favorite creature features. Again, let me know yours in the comments below. Next month, in honor of my children's birthdays, I will be discussing my top 10 siblings in horror films. And if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button.